So pretty regularly, I make content for multiple classes, not only my main rogue, but also hunter, priest, warlock, whatever. And I like playing a lot of these other classes. They're a lot of fun alts, and there's a lot of specs I was able to discover in Legion. Lots of times do people come over to the stream or in a video and ask me if I were to stop playing my rogue for any reason, what class would I play? And usually I respond with a joke like, okay, if I can't play Outlaw, I literally would just quit the game. But let's, for an exercise, take a moment and actually make that into a question and answer it in a serious manner. What would I play out of the alts that I have if I were to stop playing my rogue? Let's say, for example, Blizzard were to take out Outlaw. Honestly, that would be a deal breaker for me. I mean, I like what they did with Subtlety. I feel like it got a better spec. Assassination is basically what it was, like the old school rogue style. But I just feel like when it comes to rogues, they just took so much fun, nitty-gritty little things that I loved about just rogues in general away. So for me, Subtlety and Assass, while fun specs, honestly not enough to keep me playing the game. I honestly love Outlaw. I love the roll mechanic about it. I love the cooldowns. I love the party theme. I love it. I like everything about it. And so far, even though it's very RNG, just like a legendary, I'm one of those few people that have had great experience with the spec. There are some downtimes, but for the most part, I've had a great time with the specialization for both PvE and PvP. But let's say if Blizzard were to take out Outlaw, I would have no reason to play a rogue. What would I play? What are the classes and the specs in particular that I would play? Let's take a look at first why I'm playing Outlaw. Well, the reason I play Outlaw is the reason I played all the other specs back when I did play. When I finally started understanding the game and started kind of getting better at it, you know, just improving and generally just past all the basic noob stuff, still, like, you know, pretty bad at the game as a player, but not completely, like, brand new. You know what class I started playing? What spec I started playing for PvP? I decided to play a Resto Druid. I mean, that was literally the most garbage tree in a BG. I mean, I'm literally running around like a broccoli healing my head off, but honestly, it does nothing. That healing absolutely did nothing at the time. Broccoli Druid was pretty bad back in Kata. Okay, Mop rolled around. Boomies are really good. Resto Druids are really good. Even Pharaohs became like the best dueling spec. What did I do? I decided, okay, I'm just gonna re-roll from a powerful class onto Rogue. And if anybody of you played back in Mists of Pandaria, Rogues were fucking miserable when you started playing as a Rogue. Honestly, terrible. I mean, Jesus, what was Blizzard thinking? We had to pick between Shadow Step and Preparation. Like that, things were bad. Things were really bad. As patches went on, of course, the specs became better, and out of the specs that were competitive, like Assassination and Subtlety, which spec did your boy Dal play? Combat. The most garbage spec in the game. But the reason I play all these specs is because they're fun. But a part of what I like about the specs is there's a little bit of that challenge to it. There's a little bit of that specific playstyle that I like. But mostly the challenge is what can... If a spec is just really challenging, not like a get good kind of kid, but it's like really hard and most people just don't even bother. I'm the kind of person that will take the time and I will bother with a spec to prove somebody else out there on the internet that yes, it's playable and yes, I did it just fine. I don't know why I have this tendency, but that's how I've been playing World of Warcraft. I have fun out of it. So let's take a look at some of the alts that I have and some of the reasons why I will play them. Starting off with one of the alts, we have the Hunter. And I actually like the changes that the Hunter went through in Legion. The spec that I am going to, I guess, spearhead with this one, spearhead, get it, because of the Survival Hunter. It is a Survival Hunter. I think it's probably one of the most unique specs out of the 3 specs of Hunter. I mean, you have 2 ranged specs, which Hunter has been ranged for God knows how long now. The last time people played in Melee, I think was, if not BC, I'm pretty sure Vanilla. And now we're bringing back Vanilla Hunter. Now, this spec is kind of competitive on damage. I mean, it can do really well, you know, bar a few legendaries, which I already have anyway. So I would have the tools in order to be competitive in terms of single target and AoE. And I've seen how it performs in Mythic Plus and Raids. It's weird, it's a bit wonky, but it's stable. I like the traps mechanic. I like how it is. While the other specs do have traps, you have a lot more emphasis on your traps. You can modify from a slow trap to a caltrops that also deals damage. Your frozen trap can have waylay where it stuns the enemy. So I feel like you can have a lot of fun mechanics to make enemies walk into a trap, get stunned, and you just unload a bunch of damage on them. The biggest problem with this spec, and of course just about every spec is going to have some kind of a glaring issue that maybe pulls a lot of people away, but I'm the kind of guy that wants to prove everybody right, This spec is all about spinning plates. It is the spinning plates class. You're not only managing debuffs on the enemy, which you need to manage, you're not only managing buffs on yourself, which you should probably get better at, you're not only managing the cooldowns and the energy resources and the charges of your Mongoose Bite, which basically comes out to be about, what, 80% of your damage anyway when it comes to Skada charts. I mean, it's just such a weird spec, but it's really all about spinning plates. It's not like it's something that is like get good kind of thing where it's like mechanically hard, like a puzzle and you solve it, or a boss and you find a way around it. No, you're just literally spinning plates, making sure they keep spinning, and if one plate falls, you want to make sure nothing else falls. That's the difficulty of the spec. So what I'm saying is the specialization is not really all that convenient compared to its counterparts, Marksman and Beast Mastery. Beast Mastery being the easiest, and Marksman being probably the most reliable. So this specialization, I feel like, shares some of these inconvenient aspects with Outlaw, and it just makes me want to play it and just show everybody, look how good it is if you actually know how to play it. Just something about that feels really, really good. So Survival Hunter would be one of the classes I would even think about playing. The next up is a caster, Warlocks, primarily Demonology Warlock. I gotta say, all three specs are pretty fun. They're really, really fun. You have Affliction with all the dots and all the good AoE explosions. I was surprised at how good Affliction was for AoE. I mean, when you go into Mythic Plus and you just have adds everywhere, you can just blow them up. But you also have great single target damage. Destruction did get a lot of changes that at first I was kind of really hesitant about, but I feel like for the most part, as long as Chaos Bolts are hard hitters for PvP or PvE, then the spec still has some meat and bones. I just hope it was a bit more mobile. There was a lot more Mr. Pandaria utilities thrown back in, but that's just, you know, the plethora that Blizzard doesn't really care about. And then, of course, there's Demonology. I like the idea with Demonology, and I've always liked that idea from the start, even though they lost Metamorphosis to Demon Hunters, which rest in peace Metamorphosis for Warlocks, they do summon a ton of pets. When I first heard that, I thought that was an awesome idea. You could just summon waves of imps and other demons and extra bigger demons and puppies and whatever. I mean, I thought it was going to be just, you know, every single spell is a summon, but it kind of comes down to kind of that, but not really. So it's almost kind of realized its own, I guess, potential, but not really at the same time. But by God, is it fun. I just love the idea of just summoning a ton of pets everywhere, just all day long. Just because eventually it kind of feels like a wave. When you summon enough pets, then you feel like you're really overpowering and overburdening the enemy, whether it's PvP or PvE. And I feel like that feeling is kind of interesting. The best or the worst part about the spec is the pet empowerment. Every time you summon a set of pets, you have to empower it, which doesn't really feel all that exciting for a lot of people. Kind of feels boring, if anything. It's not a fun mechanic, really. But if anything, I'd call it a tedious mechanic. It's kind of like Outlaw Rogue's RNG, the Survival Hunter spinning plates thing. It's just the pet empowerment is something that you just need to watch out for. And just something you'll have to incorporate into your rotation, something you'll have to maintain. Which I honestly don't mind. It is a mana drain and it doesn't really do too much, and it kind of just has this like a rampy effect because you first gotta puff it pets, and then your pets gotta do the auto attacks, and then it's just a weird mechanic. Imagine if you have to put dots on the enemy and then use an ability to empower your dots. It just doesn't quite work as well because dots kind of sit on the enemy, but while the pets can literally just go running all over the place. Regardless, I really do like the specialization in terms of its just one-shot capability with the artifact weapon. That honestly makes it for me. So even if we have such annoying mechanics such as pet empowerment, honestly, as long as they can just summon a bunch of them, buff them up once, sacrifice all that health and see the big numbers, it just makes me so excited. Alright, this one I feel like shouldn't be a surprise. Druid. Primarily Feral Druid. Now, because Outlaw is a spec that I really want to enjoy, I really have no reason to play Assassin. Subtlety. They're great specs, and they're fun to play around with and mess around with, but my probably main love is Outlaw. But if I were to change a way, you know, to play something that's like a rogue but not quite Subtlety and Assass, I'd probably do Feral, which is basically a little bit of Assassination and a little bit of Subtlety combined together. The way I describe Feral is kind of like Assassination Rogue, but really fun. Not to say anything bad about Assass, but Feral, if you never played it in Legion, I feel like you got him. I kind of like the idea, let's say in PvP or PvE, the whole shift in forms. I mean, I know it was a little bit smoother back in the other expansions where you could basically like insta shift out of like cat form into human into cat like really quickly to shift out of roots. but I kind of like the idea of being able to go from cat to a deer to a bear to a cat to a deer to a bear when I'm running away from enemies or if I'm trying to avoid different parts of the fight. I kind of like how it got it structured, and I feel like there's a really cool emphasis on the dots for a melee class. For the longest time, I talked about Assass, what I wanted out of it, and I wanted for Assass to be basically an Affliction Warlock with just dots for days, but with daggers. You applied various types of poisons and various types of bleeds and hemorrhages on the enemy, but instead you kind of just have your Garrote and your Rupture, and then you just can spread it on people, but you don't really have to. You have your poisons, but they do okay damage. So it seems like the dots become like 1/2 of your damage, if not 45%, and then the melee attacks and the poison applications and then the actual physical damage if you stab in the enemy becomes like the 50 or 60%, whatever. But with Feral, it actually feels like you have actual strong, reliable dots, and they really meld people. One thing you are is really squishy, no matter what you do. As a Feral, I remember when they had Bark Skin, when they had the Ursoc's health thing, and then they had the wall, they had a lot of defenses. But in PvP, they feel really squishy, and with the recent nerfs, they don't feel quite as, I guess, easy to play. I mean, the changes to Feral were good in terms of the damage buffs to make him viable, but when you take out spawn abilities like Cyclone and other instacast abilities that they had in the past, other utilities, other defensives, and other just ways to play the specialization, and then you're giving him more damage, and then you give him that one incap ability, but then you curbing it with a longer cooldown and 5 comp points now needed, it does feel a little bit bad. But overall, I'd say this is a fun spec. Again, for most specs, I should, I guess, mention that I would probably play most of these in PvP as well as PvE, so I'm kind of trying to think broad here. So Feral would definitely be one of those classes that would be fun for me to play. And let's talk about, this one is not going to make sense to any of you, but let me explain. Death Knight. Yeah. The face rolly, the Lich Kingy, the level 68 Death Knight complaining on the forums about how the game is dead kind of guy. Yeah, I probably play Death Knight, primarily Unholy. I feel like there's a lot of micromanagement with this class in terms of buffs and dots. I kind of like the whole, you have a pet, you have to manage the pet, you have your runic power, and you have your runes. I like, when you play as Frost, for the most part, you're just rotating between Obliterate and Frost Strikes. That's really 2 abilities that you ever, for the most part, use, and then your 1 AoE. And I mean, there's just not a lot of abilities to press, but when it comes to Unholy for both PvP and PvE, there's a bit of management to do. It feels like the game PvP and PvE doesn't ever change, so basically you're still PvEing while in PvP, but the PvE rotation, your raiding rotation, dungeon rotation, is actually kind of interesting and somewhat complex, and I very much like the whole stack debuffs, maintain dots, make sure you're not overburden yourself with too much resources. There's a little bit of fun with that. I think it has great damage and amazing sustain. The specialization of Unholy Death Knight has been through some weird changes in the past expansions, from Pandaria to Warlord's General to now, and I feel like in Legion it has really just nice and stable output of everything, from the mechanics to the playstyle, and the damage itself can be very bursty, and you can control that burst without really thinking, okay, I don't really know what's going on. It makes some clear sense here. And the sustained damage, while a little bit difficult to pick up on, makes also some real sense. Plus, it has great class fantasy. I mean, I actually I was confused at first. How would they pull off the specialization? With a Festering Strike, Scourge Strike, maintaining 2 dots. Now, it changes to a 1 dot, and then another ability uses a debuff that it stacks, and the other pops that debuff off the enemy, so you're kind of trying to balance it. It's kind of like juggling, but not quite. But it's very satisfying to play, because once you figure out the rotation, your Scata charts honestly just show you exactly how much damage you're doing. Out of all the classes of the list, I would say this one is the least inconvenient. But I feel like with Unholy Death Knight, for at least PvE and PvP, I feel like there's a lot of resource management. There's really meticulous tracking. And it's kind of one of the specs like Subtlety. When if you're really good at it, then you're going to see some amazing numbers. But I am not that great at Unholy yet. I'm still not fully understand the spec. I mean, I can hit for about 1,000,000 DPS when it comes to burst, and then maybe 800 outside of my burst, but I still don't really know exactly what I'm doing. And I kind of like the energy resource management for it, the rune power and the runes. I guess it reminds me a little bit of Rogue. So out of all the classes, this one I simply just like for the playstyle, because in a way it's somewhat kind of not really similar to Rogue, but it doesn't have like this weird inconvenient mechanic to really, you know, fuel me up. And the last class on this one, and my favorite, probably one of my favorite alts in Legion from the beginning and currently. My alts do change from time to time, but this one keeps coming back and rearing its head. I would say is the priest. And of course, you would only play the shadow priest, the best priest. Now, I do like discipline, and I did like discipline for a bit because it was bad. I mean, the spec as a healer was like, oh, you don't want to play disc. I was told by everybody in my guild, don't play disc, just play holy. Disc, you gotta deal damage, and it's just you run out of mana, and then you can be competitive. And I said, hold my beer, I'm gonna play some disc. But then, this isn't a healer video. I want to talk about the DPS classes I want to play because I'm not a healer at heart. I've realized that after Cataclysm or Pandaria, I don't heal that well. I better do damage, you know, just mindlessly smashing my head into keyboard and making the big numbers happen. I'm way better at that. I'm not a smart guy if you haven't told. Anyway, I like Shadow Priest because it has a great mix of dots and casts. It's kind of like an Affliction Warlock, and remember back in the day when Affliction Warlock and Shadow Priest were basically the same thing. A lot of people just thought a Shadow Priest is basically a wannabe Affliction Warlock, or just a guy who does not want to level a Warlock. But in Legion and with the previous expansions, I feel like they define the specialization a little bit more. I mean, it still has the 2 dots and the channel ability a lot like that of an Affliction Warlock, but what differentiates it is the Void form use. It really just takes a little bit of a chunk of that rage mechanic or rage bar that Demonology Warlocks used to build and just slapped it towards Priest. But it works out pretty well. And at first I didn't like the idea of a ramp up mechanic for Priest, but it really grew on me and I really like it. Plus the animations for Shadow Priest are honestly great. And out of all the classes that I play, when the animations really stand out, it helps me just enjoy the game a lot more. I mean, I could be literally killing Mythical Jaden, about to kill, but when you have that epic animation on top of it, it just makes the experience that much cooler. So then when you're doing some menial things like, let's say, grinding for a mount, or just doing a low-key Mythic Plus, or maybe doing some dailies, those animations keep popping in, and it just makes the experience that much more fresher. And of course, as the expansion goes on, this kind of animations will wear out, but I feel like the Priest animations are probably some of the most unique animations in the game currently. Plus, Shadow Priests are very versatile. What I like about them in PvP and PvE both is they're just a pretty movement-friendly casters. I mean, I don't have legendaries to make my movement and casting easier like I do on my mage, but this class just has so many insta-cast abilities and fairly low cast abilities, especially as you build up that haste in Void form. It makes it that much easier to deal with movement mechanics. In PvP, you can run a whole build where you just don't spend a single time casting a single spell besides your artifact weapon. And for PvE, you can run a variety of builds in order to help you adjust to different situations. And that's kind of what I liked about Outlaw Rogue. Outlaw can adjust from an AoE clusterfuck of enemies to a single target boss to a cleave of 2 or 3 targets, and Shadow Priest can easily do that too. The more people to dot and the longer the fight goes on, the stronger they are, and especially in the execute mechanic, do they really shine in terms of damage. And I really like that. It kind of makes me think of Outlaw. The biggest issue that a lot of people don't like about Shadow Priest, and a lot of reasons why people would rather play a mage or a warlock or even a druid when it comes to like casters, you do have really too much of a ramp up. I mean, if you have targets, let's say in a Mythic Plus, that simply would just not live past maybe like 30 seconds, your damage on Skada will just look like you are trash. You're not doing anything, you're not helping the team. So for you, for damage to really start shining, the fight needs to last longer than I do in a bedroom. So the priest, just a lot of people are jarred by the lack of damage at the very beginning, which can be a little bit disheartening, especially when you're running as a Mythic Plus priest, just trying to get your basic stuff done, and you damage, even if you have the best abilities and legendaries in the game, you just cannot get past the 500k DPS. And I can definitely feel how it feels demoralizing to play that, but it's also fun to figure out ways of how to buff your damage, how to maximize your damage. And I feel like just the way the spec has been done, I feel like there's just so much more room to grow with a simple specialization like that. And that's kind of why I would probably end up playing Priest if I were to play a caster. Well, that was literally just about every single class in the game that I have interest with. There are a lot of classes that I still do play, and not all of them I would even consider. Classes like a warrior, a demon hunter, maybe even a paladin, just don't really feel me, even shaman. I mean, those are classes that I haven't got to explore, so I guess there's still possibility that I might even want to main those classes. But out of the odds that I got to play so far, and out of the classes that really drove me to want to level one up from watching other people play, whether it be from streams to YouTube videos to even just trying to compete with those same people in a raid like an LFR. When you see a Demonology Warlock put in amazing numbers, you want to find out how it works, and then you level one yourself. When you see a Feral Druid literally destroying you in a 2v2 match, you want to make one yourself and figure out how it plays. So that's usually how I figured I would level most of these classes and why I decided on these specializations. For me, the game has always been about just choosing the spec you want to play, except for Warlord's General when combat rogues were absolutely OP. But for me right now, Outlaw Rogue is the best spec. And if Blizzard were to remove it, possibility that they might do some crazy changes that I might not even like it in the next expansion. Well, if any of these classes stay similar to what they are, or maybe get better, well, all those classes are an option for me in case Blizzard does something weird with rogues, which chances are somebody's gonna get the short straw, and could it be rogues? Possibly, but could it be warriors too? You never really know. So, this is the video of all the alts that I will play, and if you ever want to try a very fun alt, these classes and specializations listed in the video might be something you guys might enjoy, because if you enjoy playing Outlaw or you enjoy my Outlaw Rogue content or enjoy watching Outlaw Rogues kick ass even though they're not really all that great, these are some of the other classes that have a little bit of that skill ceiling, skill ramp. I'm not really sure what to call it, but there's a little bit of that gap in order to get really good at it. The weird mechanics to kind of hurdle over in order to see the true potential of all these classes. And anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.